Welcome to Leading with Curiosity. Command and control leadership is dead. We interview leaders, entrepreneurs, and executive coaches challenging old paradigms and fostering cutting-edge leadership. Here's your host, certified executive coach, Nate Leslie.
Hey, listeners, in pursuit of my own learning journey, I'm feeling very close to a systems change initiative that is having global implications. The Wall Street Journal recently captured a mosaic of stories from Bayer, one of the world's largest companies that is undergoing a transformational system change that they're calling dynamic shared ownership. In this future of work, joy and sustainable performance coexist, which is what I've been trying to achieve in my world in executive coaching and leadership training, where we need to have a great time while we're driving. In this system, individuals are valued for their uniqueness, not just merely cogs in the machine. Collaboration and partnership drive rapid cycles of learning and creating value. Dynamic shared ownership is the term that Bayer is using to describe this transformational leadership change. My guest today, now is a friend, Lars Bruening, based in Berlin, has been many things inside of Bayer over 30 years, including CEO of Bayer UK and Ireland. Today, he's the dynamic shared ownership catalyst at Bayer Pharma. We explore what we mean by this new leadership model and what it takes to create systematic change in a company that is well over 100 years old, has over 100,000 employees, operations in over 100 countries, yet is creating an entrepreneurial spirit inside of the organization that is driving change, innovation, joy, and fulfillment at a rate large companies like this have not seen in a long, long time. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. You're undergoing, Lars, this transformation in your leadership style. Welcome to Leading with Curiosity first. Let's jump here right into a story of what we're talking about, dynamic shared ownership and the impact that it's having on the speed at which you're able to innovate and the impact it's having on your people.
Yes, thanks, Nate. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Really excited being here and sharing this half hour with you. So as a big pharmaceutical and crop science or life sciences company, we have our traditional ways of working, and they sometimes are a little bit slow. That is probably something that people from smaller companies always think about larger companies. And yes, they are right. We are not always the fastest ones. So part of this approach of changing it into dynamic shared ownership as a new operating model is to create and decision making that doesn't sit somewhere in the hierarchy, as we often have now in traditional management systems, but that really sits with the operational teams. And that's something difficult to have in a big company. So we started this transformation by saying we identify certain teams that we call frontrunner teams, and they are allowed to operate in a different way with more decision rights and more speed to decision making. Basically, they make the decisions. They don't go through the layers of management and governance anymore.
So right there already, you've identified some teams, you call them front runner teams, and they have a little bit more flexibility and autonomy, almost as a test pilot inside of your organization.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
that's a fair way.
Yeah.
And we told to them, everybody had heard about this model of doing things differently, having decisions on the operational level, not in the hierarchy. Said, we try it out with you now. So you have the rights to make decision on your level without going through and so forth. So our team in Italy, for example, they went into inventing something that they had been craving for as a little tool, a little piece that is helpful for patients in that case that have to inject themselves. They are hemophilics. So they have to inject themselves and they need two syringes to inject. And if you inject yourself with two syringes, that's sort of messy and very difficult. So the team invented a little tool that makes it easy for the patients to keep the two vials and the two syringes, hold them in a little tool that is produced by 3D printing in the end. It's called Froggy because it has a little bit the face of a frog.
Yeah.
Or like a face of a frog, but you can hold it with your hand here and you have the syringes here, and then you can inject yourself. So it really alleviates and makes life for patients much easier. And the team was able to conceptualize that and introduce that into the market in 2.5 to 3 months. This is not a product we sell. This is a giveaway to patients. It's not a low value in itself, but it's high value in helping patients to have easier treatment. And that is always huge. Now, where is this so revolutionary? You will ask, Nate, I know.
Yeah.
In the past setting, this would have had to go through various layers of reviews on the medical side, on the supply side, on the marketing side, and all higher levels would have wanted to chime in on it and probably have come up with, could there be a risk in that? And then you end up with an organization that is relatively risk averse. Now, we have not done away with all sense and sensibility in this. This isn't meant, because we just said to people, you do, but after getting advice and seeking advice and asking for good views and quality of decision, of thinking from various people, what you then think is right to do, and you live that with ownership. So you will live also with the results of it, and you stand for that. So the medical people in the country said, of course, yeah, we will check that whether medically this is acceptable and okay. And they went through this and said, yes, we can do this, and we will do this. We support this. And that's how the team got to this much faster than we were able to do this in the past.
So let's just recap that again. So you've got a group in Italy that says we've got a great idea, and so they're likely, because they're humans, excited about that. And in the old way, that layers, as many as doing some research, as many as maybe 9 layers that goes through to try to get their great idea presented to someone who gets to make a decision, and then it comes back down all those 9 layers. So that's like 18 steps, and to maybe get it done. But you guys said, Kate, you've got the idea. You're one of our front runner teams. It's not hasty. It's done with prudence. It's done almost like a small business inside of your business, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So
that's the idea, to recreate entrepreneurial approach in micro enterprises in the teams, rather than cogs in that big wheel or big.
So anyone who's listening right now can think of this right now, this idea that we're creating entrepreneurial spirit inside of the organization where it is not hasty and careless. Those levels didn't make sure it was necessarily great. They're proving their case and then going to do it as best to their ability, as best as any business can. They're closer to getting to try stuff, and and it's also exciting in that moment because they own it, and now they have a stake in it, dynamic shared ownership. They're owning that end product probably even more than they would have if it went all the way up and all the way back down. Am I still following you right, Lars?
Yes, this is right, because this moving up and down again takes time and doesn't necessarily make the ideas sharper. And the ideas come in the end from the interaction in the market, from the patients, from the interaction with the customers, the physicians. And that's where the creativity in the business normally lies. It doesn't necessarily lie in hierarchy levels, even though people in the hierarchy may very well contribute to that. That's not contradicting it. But the initial impetus often comes from the interaction in the market on the spot. And then rather than saying, and let's review that as much as we can, say, and let's be fast on it as best as we can.
Yeah.
And there's an implicit hypothesis in that. That is, you may then end up with a decision slightly differently in the one market versus the other market, because the local teams make the decision. But they make it, of course, against the framework that is there of strategy and the framework of medical needs and requirements that is pretty strong. The hypothesis is basically, by following the local need and the local decision and the closeliness to our patients and physicians, the added benefit we get out of these more local, faster decisions is bigger than the benefit we get out of perfect standardization. That is a fundamental challenge to this traditional way the traditional way of management stems from Industrial Revolution, right? It was all about doing a process in steps and having people work in that process hand in hand, so it always passes on. But you needed to define very precisely what each individual was contributing to it, so that it all works in this process. And then you needed people who coordinate the people who do these pieces exactly. And you need to tell the people what to do exactly. And then you need to look at, are they doing it exactly the way told? That's where command and control comes from, right? And your podcast here, you have that on your website. You say command and control leadership is dead.
And I know
Oh,
it's
it's
not,
still
but I
there.
hope it is soon, right? We're in a
It's still
period of
there.
transition. It's still there, right? Yeah.
And we're working on trying to prove, and we're actually very convinced we can prove that it's not the right approach in these days, and it's not a needed approach. Many people think it's needed. It's not a needed approach to deliver benefits to patients, to farmers, to consumers, with three different businesses in pharma in Bayer, where we now apply all everywhere these same approaches to really become better, more really customer and patient focused than ever before through this mechanisms of putting the decisions where they belong.
Now, again, context for the listener. I mean, Bayer, you've been around since the 1800s. You literally have grown up through the industrial age. So each year along that path for well over 100 years, you're applying that we're saying now are no longer useful and no longer best practice. So you're having to if people out there listening think, oh, I run a small organization, how can I impact change? You're unwinding or redoing or starting again processes that have been in place for a long time, as long as yeah, I mean, gosh, well over 100 years. What's your comment on that?
No, absolutely true. I mean, a big part for all of us in the company, and I say all, is unlearning and
Unlearning.
then relearning.
Mm.
And it is clearly for leadership, because the role of leadership changes. Leadership is needed, even though you say the decisions are made on the lowest possible level, and that's the operating teams really. But you need leadership. You need less than before, but you need leadership. But it's a different leadership
Yeah.
because you don't own the decisions anymore.
So, listener, we're going to move to how Lars, as DSO catalyst for Bayer Pharma, how you're actually doing this, because I'm super intrigued in the facilitation of that. But let's just think about that again. Unlearning, and you said it does take less. So yes, if someone's wondering, does this mean less managers required? It does require less people. So that is one of the growing pains of this process for you, right? Is some people are out of a job, and overall, people are really buying into it. Are those both true?
Yeah, both is true. I mean, people are
Yeah.
buying into the idea. Everybody's excited about the idea. Well, of course, in the process, when you go into it and you realize that, okay, if we need less decision making by leadership, then probably we need altogether less leaders. And we may also find other efficiencies because if you're less focused on internal processes and more focused on the outcome for the patients, the farmers, the consumers, then probably some of the internal processes, if we stop them, also we're binding capacity, we're binding people. So there is in the system, it's a very lean system that you come up with. You need less people then.
Yeah. And for
So
those
for that
watching the
moment, as you point to, when the excitement hits reality, that it means reductions, and that it means laying people off at some stage, and that's going to happen now. Or it's in the process. It has started. That's not a fun time. That's not a fun
yeah.
time. The
Mhm.
change has its pain. Absolutely, it is the right thing to do for our customers and for the company, and in the end for the people, because just keeping people that you don't need doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
But it's still very, very painful a process, and one needs to do that
Yeah.
very consciously.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, these are ambitious goals. Anyone watching this video, I can see Bayer's mission next to you. Health for all, hunger for none. We're talking in local communities and across the globe. So these are ambitious goals connected to your mission. I love that you, as a pharma company, use that word catalyst in your title. Tell me a little bit about why the word catalyst.
Yeah, a catalyst, I mean, in chemical reaction, a catalyst is a chemical substance that is present in the reaction or that triggers the reaction that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And that's the idea. What my role currently is to help in the pharma organization of Bayer that we move into this new operating model. So that entails a lot of training, that entails a lot of communication with people, that entails a lot of, as we call it, so building the organization that really is inspired by this approach of dynamic shared ownership and enables dynamic shared ownership, so that we get to that. So all these pieces are coming together in the role of catalysts. Yeah.
I love that. Without you, the change doesn't happen. Now, when I heard about you, Lars, it feels like not so long ago through my mentor and partner Mark McGregor, and he said, Nate, you got to meet Lars. He's a friend of mine in Germany, and they're on to this model at Bayer. where at the time he said transitioning a leader into dictator, right? And you and I have talked about this now, and I don't know if I'm already making the words my own or they're yours exactly, but transformation from leader as trying to be the hero, leader as hero, to leader as host. So let's get into we've talked about why this is important. Let's get into the what a little bit. What does this mean for a leader inside your organization or anybody's organization listening now?
Yeah, for a leader, that means, as I said, in the traditional system, leaders are there to make the decisions. And at ever higher level, you make ever more aggregated decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And in the new model, the decision doesn't sit with the leaders. The decision sits with the teams.
Yeah.
The teams may have a leader or not. That can also be in different shapes and forms. But the team comes together and makes the decision. So in the past, we had the hierarchy. We made sure through hierarchy that we have different elements coming together in the hierarchy on the higher levels. Now we need to make sure that the teams that we have are cross-functionally constructed. So there's members in the teams with different functional backgrounds, all those functional aspects that you need to make a decision, that they do this with a spirit of ownership, making that decision.
Yeah.
So ownership means, I alluded to it, means they also live with the results of it.
Mm-hmm.
Can take the resources they need, they can take that into their hands, but they live with the result.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like, yeah, but it's been in my job description that I make these things and I have a budget for it, so I'll spend that money there because it's in my job description, my boss approved it. That is not the world of the future. The world of the future is you come together as that cross-functional team, say, for this and this asset, this is the right thing to do now, and then you do it.
So
now, the
go ahead.
role of leaders is to exactly make sure that these things happen, that we have the right teams, that there is a vision for what we want to achieve, and that this is clear because there needs to be a frame for this ownership that they can take on. Then that the teams have the decision, the information they need. So information transparency is hugely important in such a model, because typically, again, information is aggregated upwards. We need to break this. We're not there. We're developing the systems that deliver that as we go forward. We need to bring this much more down to the operational level, that the transparency is there, the information is there. These are all tasks that leaders have. And then to also catalyze continuously and to coach the teams on how they run their team processes so that they can come to the decision without going to hierarchy and asking for the decision making. So this is the task of leaders, is to say no to decision making and to say you make the decision and I help you.
I just want to jump in there to bring this back to this from hero to host. In the old way, the leader thinks, I have the decision making power. I'm going to make all the right decisions and it's going to be awesome. Or they're paralyzed by fear to make those hard decisions, or somewhere in between. And maybe they succeed and maybe they don't. As we transition to leader as host or leader as facilitator, facilitate mean facile, like to make easy, from the Latin or French word to make easy. Now you go from keynote speaker with all the information to getting cross-functional teams discussing and debating and collaborating and building trust and having healthy conflict and all the things that are required. And the action is there happening on the workshop floor, not up at the podium. And they're coming out of that with having had a chance to speak to their group's priorities, to look at it from their paradigm and to challenge ideas, and then to come out with that shared ship of the decisions, right?
Yeah.
Simply put.
So, yeah, because typically this leader as a hero is the typical situation for somebody who is growing in a specific area of expertise. Let's say a marketer or a developer. They're very good at that. And because they were sort of the best ones, they became the bosses in these areas. And we still need the very good people.
Yeah.
It's not saying that we don't need them anymore. But in the past, they were driving the decisions themselves into the teams. And the teams, we always had cross-functional teams.
Yeah.
But in the end, they tended to be more coordinators between what the functions wanted to do than decision makers.
Boom. Yeah.
And that's brought always the hierarchy in. And then you had the governance meetings where the teams needed to go and say, after all our coordination work, it looks like this is the path that we should be taking.
Yeah.
And they were either saying yes or no collectively, the leaders in the governance setting.
Cool. You're a great example of how transformation happens because you've been at Bayer for 30 years, started in finance, were on that sort of stream to be the finance expert. At one point ended up as CEO of Bayer UK and Ireland. And now here you are leading people, right, on this transformational journey. So you've kind of departed from that area of expertise of finance into this role of helping with transformation. One of your company's LinkedIn post shared that the future of this work is joy, where joy and sustainable performance coexist, where joy and sustained performance coexist. What's it meant to you, Lars, to be able to be on in this part of the business as a catalyst?
For me, this is, I mean, it's a wonderful task that I currently have. I really enjoy that. And for me, it is really sort of my career has been varied. I've done varied things in the company, long time here, but really varied things. And it has ever grown this insight that it's in the end, it's the people.
In the end, it's the
Business
people.
success, it's people,
Yeah.
and nothing but that. You need a product, but who has developed the product? It's been people.
Yeah.
And bringing the people together in their cross-functional thinking has been something I've been doing in various roles in the past. And now this whole program now, this whole approach really speaks to it in a way that we've never done it before in the company, but that really comes from my heart also, which is we speak to it as one of the objectives of what we want to achieve is fulfilled employees, fulfilled people.
Fulfilled
People who are
people.
not just a cog in the system and coming to work and going home, but who are fulfilled by what they do because they feel they are much closer than to the decision making for the benefit of patients than ever before. So we want fulfilled people, we want world-class innovation for the benefit of patients, of farmers, of consumers, our three businesses, and we want superior financial performance. And these things go very well together. If it's fulfilled people who work with their full energy on this purpose of health for all and hunger for none, and we have people who drive the innovation in the right and appropriate settings, then the financial performance will happen. I have no doubt on that. But it's always the purpose first, it's the people, and it's the performance that comes out of it. And that is very much how I've learned to think over the years. Personally, I'm very pleased. This is the way that we see this now as company and developers.
Yeah. You said something quickly I want to double down on here that you made a connection between human fulfillment and being closer to the decisions.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
feel powerless when they feel like a decision is being made
Yeah.
so many rungs above them. And in your words, you had cross-functional teams before, but they were more coordinators of what the decision makers had made. But the human fulfillment comes by being closer to the decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, and we describe that as the focus on outcomes that we have with this. And outcomes is the impact on stakeholders that we have. And when these front runner teams that I mentioned, when they started working, or when any team now starts working in the ways of dynamic shared ownership, one of the first exercises is to really be clear on what is the outcomes that we strive for in the longer term, in the midterm, and in the next 90 days. And let's focus on the next 90 days. So what is in the next 90 days that we can do to really enhance the impact that we have on patients, where we do something good for patients? And when you have that clarity of the 2, 3 things you may want to do in the next 90 days, then this helps you identify where is maybe an internal process that you are satisfying so far, but that doesn't really change anything on the patient's benefits. Simple example, travel cost. Travel cost of a person who's doing a job and has been doing a different job before and is now maybe for that earlier job still doing some travel. And then the travel costs were rebooked in Bayer between the former job and the current job, so that they were sitting with where the task was. It's something that doesn't help any patient or any farmer or any consumer in the world. So we stop these things now.
Yeah.
And it's a very minor example, but a real one that has happened. And it speaks to it a lot of budget processes we used to have, and we are curtailing these. Many of these internal processes led to limitations that people felt. And therefore also the courage of proposing something, like on a country level, proposing a froggy
Right.
was not very high because it was thought like, oh, maybe this isn't in budget. Oh, maybe quality Yeah, will never, as a department, will never approve. Maybe medical will not. Maybe senior management has a different priority. So lots of limiting beliefs that were creeping into the company over the years, and are probably creeping in all these big companies
Yeah.
over time. And then by saying, you get the power to make decisions, own up to them, but you get the power to make decisions, gets you closer to what really matters for the patients. And if you do that and you make a decision in this regard and see it implemented quickly, wow, you go home and are really much more satisfied. So that team that invented Froggy and is now seeing patients use that, they are very, very satisfied with that step, and they're looking for the next steps.
The way you just phrased that was great. People, if they feared, they had that limiting belief. If they feared, they'd be told no. Then, because we're human, our courage, our level of courage to offer new ideas decreases. So now you're inviting people to be courageous and in giving them that platform to share new ideas and maybe it happens and maybe it doesn't. But the idea is that you're out there actively seeking the new ideas now. Is that kind of what I heard?
Yeah, that's very well rephrased. Absolutely.
Okay.
It's this focus on the outcomes, and it's another element that we describe here as behaviors that really are needed and welcome in this environment that we're trying to create, is to be fully authentic, to not hold back with your thoughts. And it is about the value you contribute in the team. Yeah. And the team will also give you feedback, and you will grow together as team when you give each other feedback. You build trust to one another and so on. So your whole position in the organization depends a lot more on your interaction and your value contribution in the team than maybe in the past. It has often also a lot depended on what your manager was thinking about you.
As
So
I've learned about
sometimes there
you,
was a tendency for people to satisfy their manager. Not always, but
yeah.
sometimes that happened. Or to shut up because the manager doesn't like certain things. We try and overcome that with that really orientation towards the outcomes and the trustful environment. Trust is created by feedback and open talk. And so we see these things happening and having real impact on how people feel and behave. The level of energy of the colleagues who work in these frontrunner teams has just risen significantly versus what it was before. And
Wow.
this, I shared one example with you. There's plenty of examples. One of our radiology teams invented a new product, also a new product that they bring to market now, in times that was a good quarter or a bit more than a quarter. In the olden days, 18 months.
Wow. Wow. Let's talk a little bit, if we can, about your role as catalyst. It crosses over to my role as leadership trainer and facilitating experiences for people to make progress. I know as I've gotten to know you, your passion for coaching and for helping people get from where they are now to where they want to be. What does it tactically look like in your role when you say, okay, I'm going into a country or a department or a group, and I'm going to train people on how to do this?
Yeah. So we even have a whole team around that. We've built this. We call them DSO coaches. So colleagues, this was initially coming from outside, but now we have trained internal people up to this that are really now trained and very proficient at working with teams through these situations. And you can do a lot of theory. So we have, of course, a document that describes all that we are talking about here. And I suppose many people in the company have read it, if not all, probably not all, but most. But it's only theory. And you need to once experience how this different energy comes about. And it is this moving from this more reactive mindset of, oh, there's a budget. There's an expectation towards me, maybe by my boss, maybe by the internal processes, maybe by the governance committee, to where do we create value? How do we collaborate? There's a traditional way of doing that. And then in this kind of workshop that we organize there for the teams, we gradually move them in their mindset towards a much more creative mindset, where you look for the opportunity to create value rather than for the need to fulfill budget.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that can be fundamentally different.
So your internal coaches go in and work with the group. They have the theory, they have the documents, and then they explore real world application through some facilitation and coaching to create opportunities to see things differently and think more creatively than reactively, and then in particular in these front runner teams, than actually build a case to go and make the change.
And exactly do that and experience that in this setting, and experience how cross-functional thinking, when you don't always say, oh, I can't do that, but you say, oh, if we could do that, it would be brilliant. Can we think about a world in which this is possible? And then colleagues chime in and say, yeah, but we could do it this way, or we could do that. And it grows, the ideas grow. And a lot of really rethink of how we do business happens in these sessions. And that is basically the way we want to then collaborate moving forward on an almost daily basis. Carrying that from a workshop experience into daily life is quite some endeavor still, but we're on it, and gradually and increasingly so this works. And yes, people go home with a high level of excitement and energy and fulfillment.
Excitement, energy, joy, fulfillment, all through this coaching lens of I don't have the answers, but collectively we probably do. And what you just said right there is so foundational in any change management initiative, is when we hear, no, we can't do that, probing and say, okay, tell me why you think that. And if we could do it, what solution can you think of, right? And helping them be able to express that idea that it can't happen, but then also getting them involved in the creative solution to overcome it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Lars, I love seeing organizations move to a world where they can increase joy and sustainable performance. I know you're going to continue to play a big role in my life, and I feel like this idea of dynamic shared ownership is helping me see a leader's journey from learning about to learning how to lead teams through that coaching mindset and giving up some of that control. But now I'm seeing it even further towards that goal line of making entire organizational change and essentially reinventing the operating system. And it's just given me such a clearer picture of the end goal that I get to help clients and organizations move towards. So you're a big part of my learning journey, and I'm so glad to be along for the ride here now. And I look forward to seeing where all of this goes for you and for me and for all the organizations that I get to help.
I give you a last one, Nate.
Let's do it.
I give you a last one, which is like when you start this and you talk a lot about the creative mindset and leadership behaviors, and then you could think this is a cultural program.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Bill Anderson, our chief executive, who brought this topic into the organization, this way of working. And he was very clear from the get-go. This is not a culture program. This is a system change, because the system drives behaviors, and the hierarchical system predicts certain behaviors. So we need to overcome that traditional management and hierarchy system to really change the behavior. So we change the system, and through that and along with that, we change the behavior. So for one, the cultural elements in that have a real credibility, and we will be able to achieve much more than we have ever achieved in cultural programs in the past. In most big companies, these have been limited. But as long as you don't tackle the hierarchical system, well, you're sort of disempowering the teams that you want to empower.
System change create increased joy and sustainable performance. So those are now byproducts by creating the system change.
Yes.
I'll continue to track this journey, Lars, and I'll continue to learn and share. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Nate.
Thanks for listening to Leading with Curiosity. Please share, follow, and rate the show so that other leaders can make positive change in the world. Connect with Nate at nateleslie.ca. And remember, the brain behaves very differently when encouraged to think rather than told to listen.